Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear has done what many Democrats have failed to do, and that's win an election in a deep red state, not just once, but twice. He's also a leader who talks freely and openly about his faith, values, service, and showing up for people. So, how does he feel about the Trump presidency so far? How are the administration's policies impacting people in his state? Will we ever be the United States of America again? And will he run for president in 2028? Governor Beshear, thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thanks for having me.
And I like your backdrop. You've got an Honest Abe behind you. So, are you in the governor's mansion right now?
I am. If you're Kentucky's governor on a podcast, you got to have a picture of Lincoln and a horse.
There you go. Well, thank you very much for doing that for us as well. So I know that politics runs in your family. Your father was the governor of Kentucky from 2007 to 2015. And I'm wondering how watching him in action informed your understanding of public service and how to be a leader.
It absolutely did. I am blessed to have two amazing parents that were vested in me and my future since my birth and are still calling me today, telling me what I should do differently. uh, but my dad's service was really started before I was born. He was a state representative when I came into this world. He was lieutenant governor when I was 6 to 10, and then he lost a governor's race. And my goodness, I mean, your dad is Superman. And you see him losing something like that. And I still remember how devastated I was that night. You know, we're in one of those hotel rooms. And I remember on this night that his dream had just died, or so we thought. He was sitting on the bed next to me telling me I was going to be okay. Talk about an amazing parent, putting his kids first in those most difficult times. But he came back after losing a race that he probably should have won in 87. He won a race he probably shouldn't have been able to in 2007. And I got to be a part of that. I was a 30-year-old attorney at the time, so he got a lot of free legal work out of me. But watching how he governed, watching how he governed through the Great Recession, when he didn't talk about what he was going to cut, he talked about what he was going to preserve, what he valued so much, which was education and healthcare and public safety, that even in times of scarcity, he was going to put those first. And then he had an opportunity under President Obama to expand Medicaid and create the gold standard for state-run healthcare exchanges. And I remember one of the 2 days that convinced me to get into politics was I was standing in an elevator with him, and in walked a woman and burst into tears. I mean, absolutely burst into tears. And she looks at my dad and she says, "You're the reason I'm still alive." She said, "I couldn't get covered. I was dealing with cancer. I wasn't going to be able to pay for the treatments, and I was going to pass away. But because of the actions that you took in office as a government official, she was not only still here on earth, she was healthy." So between being able to see that firsthand and then the birth of my two kids who deserve a better world than they're growing up in, I got a call to service to try to get up every day and just try to make this world and especially my state a little bit better.
Well, you and your Lieutenant Governor, Jacqueline Coleman, are the only current Democratic statewide elected officials in Kentucky. So I guess I'd like to simply ask you, how did you do it? And how do you do it?
I think the way we do it is really three things and then effort. But those things are first recognizing that people aren't as political as we think that they are. And when someone wakes up in the morning, they're not thinking about the next election. They're thinking about their job and whether they make enough to support their family. They're thinking about their next doctor's appointment for themselves or their parents or their kids. They're thinking about the roads and bridges they drive. They're thinking about the public school they drop their kids off at, and they're thinking about whether they feel safe in their neighborhood and in their community. And so I spend 80% of my time focused on those core concerns and areas. And the great part about it is when we do better in those areas, and we have across the board in Kentucky, we lift everybody up, Democrats, Republicans, and independents. We make their life better. We make it maybe a little bit easier. And at the end of the day, if you've helped someone pay for that prescription that they were worried they couldn't afford, that's a lot more important to them than the issue of the day. I think the second piece is I talk to people like they're people. I mean, we talk to people and not at them. And maybe I learned that because a lot of my life, people look down on my state. Now I think they're looking up to it. But we've allowed well-meaning advocacy speak to creep in and sanitize our language in ways where we're no longer communicating with emotion. So Kentucky got hit in the opioid epidemic harder than just about anywhere, though we just announced a 30% decrease in overdose deaths last year. Thank God. But everyone I know who suffered from addiction calls it addiction. They don't call it substance use disorder. And if you talk to them, they say it cheapens how difficult it is, how emotional it is to go through, and how hard the fight is. People who are hungry don't say they are food insecure. We don't normally call our inmates our justice-involved population. You know, we can't sound like professors because if people want to trust you, they've got to feel like they know you. And that's not how we talk to people that we know. And then
Do
the
you think
last,
I was going to say, Governor, do you think a lot of Democrats were starting to talk that way?
yes, yes. And I think it was a lot of well-meaning advocacy groups who were worried about stigma. And I absolutely understand that. But I think when we try to reduce stigma, we don't try to change words, we try to change minds. You know, in Kentucky, we now have more treatment beds than just about any other state. We embraced our citizens, our people that were suffering from addiction because they're our friends and our family members, and we've all lost so many people. I think that's how we go about that piece. And just the final, how we win, and I think you alluded to it, is sharing our why. You know, Democrats talk a lot about the what our policy is, subsection 1, bullet point 3, when we don't talk about our why. You know, why do we make the decisions we do? Why do we push the policies that we do? And for me, that's my faith. And so I often communicate about a decision I've made, you know, based on my faith.
You also did something unusual, I think. You are a pro-abortion rights candidate, or you were a pro-abortion rights candidate who talked openly, as I mentioned, about his, your faith. And so how were you able to have those things, to reconcile those two things for people who may feel strongly one way or the other and don't necessarily, are not necessarily able to straddle both of those camps?
I think part of it is that sharing the why. I'll give you a slightly different example. In my last election, my General Assembly passed the nastiest anti-LGBTQ bill we'd ever seen, and I vetoed it. And when I talked about why I vetoed it, I talked about my true reason that my faith teaches me that all children are children of God. And this bill was picking on a bunch of kids that were probably already struggling. And if their legislature was going to show them hate, I, as their governor, wanted to show them love. I wanted to show them that people out there care about them. And I'll never forget, after saying that all children are children of God, the next day, I was actually greeted by a number of people that would say something along the lines of, they might not agree with me, but they knew I was doing what I thought was right. And so when we talk about our why, maybe we can create enough space to where people can back up from what they hear out in the political sphere and maybe think a second time, or not judge another individual by one position or one decision.
Governor Beshear, as you know, there was a lot of focus on Donald Trump's first 100 days in office. And I'm curious how you would evaluate his performance so far.
I would say it's unfortunate because when a president fails, the people of the United States hurt. You know, regardless of their party, we should all want to root for a president to be successful because it means the American people are successful. Now, there have been some things for Kentucky. He's done well. We've had 2 major natural disasters this year alone, 13 since I became governor. His FEMA operation is some of the best I've seen. Secretary Nome has been here. And the way that they are working and treating people is better than after just about any other natural disaster I've dealt with. But with that said, his tariff policy is hitting my people harder than just about anyone. It's the massive layoffs at places like UPS, but now it's the small business layoffs where that manufacturer gets some of their materials from China or overseas. They can't source it anywhere else, at least at the price that they need, and they can't pass it all along to a consumer. So what are they doing? They're laying people off. And when you're a small business in Kentucky and you're laying people off, they're people you go to church with. They're people whose kids play on your kids' baseball or soccer team. And then the prices of everything are going up. So there's one study, I think it's the Yale study, that said one of these tariff policies could cost an American family $4,700 in extra costs a year. Most Kentuckians will not make it. Most Americans will not make it. That's not cutting your budget. It's blowing a hole in it. And the on again, off again, reciprocal, across the board, industry specific, just chaos of changes of the tariffs are making people lose confidence in the markets and in this leadership. And the final thing I'd say is while that is making a huge impact, the threatened cuts to Medicaid would hit our communities just as hard, if not harder.
What do you think about sort of this philosophy that seems to be the White House seems to be signaling that this short-term pain may be worth the long-term gain?
Well, the first thing I think is that's not what he said when he was asking for people's votes. He said prices were too high under the Biden administration and he was going to make them lower. He argued that the vice president was distracted by all these different issues, but he was going to help you pay bills at the end of the month. And he's done the exact opposite. And I've never seen anything in politics or in government as potentially devastating to families in terms of higher costs that is so attributable to the decisions of one person and one person alone, because Donald Trump is saying, I'm making the decisions on these tariffs that is making it harder for you to get by. But the other piece of it is, listen, in Kentucky, our economy has been booming. We've created more jobs than any other administration, more private sector investment, higher wages. So we understand what reshoring manufacturing is all about. We're building the two biggest battery plants on planet Earth. You cannot build a new factory in the period of time that this president is talking about. It's going to take a year and a half to 3+ years, and both in the construction and in the early operation, they're going to need to import materials or goods to help them out. So what we're seeing is a slowdown in the manufacturing sector because of the president's policies that he claims will increase it. So this is a bad trade policy, and overall, it's just going to hurt American families. It's not going to work. In fact, our country was growing in the economy. It hadn't caught up to our people yet. Before the president came in, all he had to do was hold the course, and we would have seen much better than we're seeing now.
Well, what would you have done about a trade imbalance that many Americans see as patently unfair to the United States?
Well, the first thing is I'd see it with the nuance that it deserves. While we have a trade imbalance that isn't fair to the American people, we also were seeing more foreign direct investment than just about any other country. And so what President Trump would say is our trade imbalance with Japan results in no American cars in Japan. Well, the largest Toyota manufacturing plant in the world isn't in Japan. It's in Georgetown, Kentucky. Now, it supports about 11,000 jobs. And so when we think about how we put together trade policy, it's not just what our percentage and their percentage is. It's how many jobs and how much investment do we see from those countries, and how does the change in those policies impact that investment? What are American jobs? And ultimately doing it in a very thoughtful and nuanced manner. And that's not what this administration is doing at all. Actually, I'm not sure they have the ability.
What are your constituents saying about these tariffs? What are you hearing? As you know, Kentucky went overwhelmingly for Donald Trump. Are people starting to reconsider their support of him as president of the United States, or do you think the impact of these tariffs has still not been fully felt by people in your state?
They haven't been fully felt, but people are absolutely feeling them. And they are starting to react. Small business owners are hurting, because they're laying off people that they know, and they're talking very directly about why they have to do it. We just held the Kentucky Derby. Churchill Downs paused an almost $1 billion project, and their CEO very directly on their investors call said it was because of tariffs, and that's thousands of construction jobs during that period. People are waking up, and it's both the impact of tariffs that they're starting to feel, but it's also the chaos of the everyday change in policy that I believe they're losing faith in this administration and their ability to lead. But the other rumbling thing, and I mentioned it earlier, is these threats to Medicaid have people up in arms. Medicaid covers the people we love the most, our parents and our kids. Half of Kentucky's kids are covered by Medicaid. More than 40% of the births every year in Kentucky are covered by Medicaid. And then for our parents, 70% of our long-term costs are covered by Medicaid. And thankfully in Kentucky, we have a thriving rural healthcare system with hospitals that employ thousands of Kentuckians. All of that will be wiped out with these threatened Medicaid cuts, as will healthcare all across rural America. While people are starting to move because of tariffs, you will see people feel betrayed, and you will see significant political movement if they make these cuts.
I know that your state's senators, both Republicans, Rand Paul and Mitch McConnell, have spoken out against tariffs, and you've given them a lot of credit for that. Why do you think more Republicans in the Senate aren't speaking out and making their views known?
I think it's a lack of courage, and I think it's a failure to uphold your oath of office. Think about all these folks in Congress that are watching a president and his administration run all over them. They aren't standing up for their branch of government. The president is trying to illegally cancel or pause programs that Congress passed a law on and then funded. And then those programs entered into a contract with the state or another organization. I mean, these members of Congress, when they took their oath of office to uphold the U.S. Constitution, most of them did it with a hand on the Bible. Think about that. And they're not living up to it at all. They should be ashamed. And one day they'll probably talk about how they should have done something different. But this is the time that we need to see courage. So I am giving a lot of credit to Rand Paul and Mitch McConnell, who I admit I don't get along with on a lot of things. We all have a very professional working relationship, which has helped us where we agree. But they deserve credit for standing up and for speaking out. And if we're going to come back together as a country, we do have to give credit to people of other parties when they stand up and do the right thing.
You are a lawyer, a graduate of UVA, Wahoo Wah. You also served as Kentucky's Attorney General for 3 years. And I'm curious, as a member of the legal community, how I would like to know how you feel about what is happening with the judiciary branch of our government and the fact that the administration seems to be defying court orders, targeting law firms involved in litigation against the federal government, and limiting judicial review.
Well, what we're seeing from a lot of the district courts is them having the courage to enforce the law and to put injunctions or freezes on a lot of the unconstitutional actions that the Trump administration is taking. We worry a lot about the Supreme Court and some of the decisions that they'll make, but we've got to give a lot of credit to these federal frontline judges that are doing the right thing. Our state attorneys general are doing a really good job in bringing a series of lawsuits to help preserve the rule of law. Two governors, Josh Shapiro and myself, have joined in with them. We have attorneys general that aren't interested in joining those lawsuits. But my job is to stand up for the people of Kentucky. And because we've joined those lawsuits, we have seen the dollars that Kentucky not only has under contract with the federal government, but most of the time is already paid out, millions upon millions of dollars. That the Trump administration was saying, we're breaking that deal. We're going back on our word and we're not going to honor our contract. We've seen those dollars come to Kentucky, thankfully.
On Meet the Press recently, when asked about upholding the Constitution or if everyone in the US is entitled to due process, President Trump said, I don't know, I'm not a lawyer. What was your reaction to that?
It's in his oath of office. He's taken it twice that he would uphold the U.S. Constitution. Again, he had his hand on a Bible. He knows.
What do you think the Democrats need to do to win back a lot of the support they've lost? According to an NBC News poll, I mean, one of the things you said is they sort of speak in a language that everyday people don't. But just 27% of registered voters in this recent poll have a positive view of Democrats. Other than talking like professors, what are they doing wrong?
Well, we need to focus and we've got to get dirt on our boots. The focus is what I talked about earlier. People think Democrats chase whatever the issue of the day is, and that we spend all of our time on culture war issues. Listen, you got to stand up for your principles, and no one should be afraid to do that. But the next day, you should be helping to open the next factory. The next day, you should be opening that next healthcare clinic. The next day, you should be pushing legislation that helps make every American's life a little bit easier. So again, making sure that we spend 80% of our time on jobs, healthcare, infrastructure, education, and public safety, and then we get out there and we show our work. So there's this myth. I actually think it's closer to a lie that Democrats are not good for the economy. So when I was running for reelection, we'd had our two best years of economic development ever, and it wasn't even close. But the first polling that came back only had me leading my opponent, who'd only worked 1 year in the private sector and actually worked for my law firm, had us within 3 or 4 points. And I thought, there's no way. But then when we saw the focus groups, it's that people need to be reminded. You can't rest on your laurels. You got to show your work. It's the idea that the signing in the Rose Garden is no longer real because a single job hadn't been created. It's not even the groundbreaking. It's the ribbon cutting, which most people make fun of, but that's when the jobs are there. And so we got out. We got out and showed the two biggest battery plants on planet Earth. We showed the cleanest, greenest recycle mill the world had ever seen. And in the county where that was in, we did about 8 points better from 2019 to 2023, because those were 350 new jobs, paying almost $40 an hour that people saw as changing their lives. So while, yes, we have people who may be a part of the base or whatever people want to call that aren't going to move the way they vote no matter what, there are a whole lot of Americans that will say, if you, regardless of your party, can help me and my family, I'll get behind you.
A lot of people are looking toward 2028 and already speculating about different candidates. Before I ask you specifically about your plans, there's a lot of excitement, as you know, Governor Beshear, around AOC and also Bernie Sanders. They're embarking on this fighting oligarchy tour. Huge crowds are gathering to see them. They seem to be really igniting the passions of the people who are showing up. Tell me how you would feel if AOC were the Democratic nominee in 2028.
We have a long way to go to 2028. But what I'll say is both AOC and Senator Sanders are building energy, and energy is important. But when I look at their tour in the long run, what I believe is we've got to be about more than being against someone, and we've got to be for something. Again, we've got to re-earn the faith of the American people, not just that we'll stand up for someone violating the rule of law, but that we have the policies and the focus to make people's lives better and to never lose that focus on those core concerns that they have.
The conventional wisdom, I think, held by many political observers is that Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders are just too progressive to win over the majority of voters in this country. Is that something that concerns you? Because you have been compared to politicians like Bill Clinton and Jimmy Carter, sort of more moderate in your views. And I wonder if that's a concern you share.
Well, I'm a common sense, common ground, get things done, governor, and that's just who I am. I care less about the rhetoric than I do about the work and the progress for helping people. And I think that's what the American people are going to need in the future. Somebody who can do the work every day to better people's lives, and we're desperately going to need leaders that can bring people together and not just excite this group or that group. And that's not a criticism of either of those individuals, because there's a long way to go, and building energy at this point is important. But I hope that every Democrat that's looking to the future, and I hope 2028 has a huge field. I'm head of the DGA next year, and I have 36 governor's races. I hope I add to that stage and that list by lifting up new leaders or more leaders, or helping people win by more, assuring they'll be on that stage. But by the time that stage is set, everybody needs to be talking about those core concerns of the American people, because that's how people will look at Democrats again and say, regardless of which one we choose, they know they're with us. We know they're for us, and we know they're going to move us ahead.
Let me ask you about your own aspirations for 2028. I know it's no secret you're exploring the possibility of running for president. Where are you in your head in terms of that decision? Are you, I mean, 50-50, 75-25? Can you take us sort of through your thought process? Because obviously it's a huge decision, not only for you, but for your family.
I thought you were going to ask me odds wise, like the Kentucky Derby, since we just got through it.
No, what do I look like? Sovereignty?
There you go. Right in front of
I was
Germany.
rooting for journalism, by the
Right
way.
in front, and there was a publisher too. Uh, when I look at this, it's in the future, and it's far enough in the future where I'm mainly focused on being the best governor that I can be, especially in these chaotic times, and then being the best DGA chair I can be next year.
That's the Democratic Governors
Yes.
Association, right?
But when I look at all of it, it's just that what we're going to have is a leader who can bring people together. And so what I'm trying to do right now is be that reasonable, common sense, common ground voice that's joined by many others. I consider Wes Moore and Maura Healey and so many of my other fellow Democratic governors, Josh Shapiro, Gretchen Whitmer. People will write about us. We're all friends. We all talk, and we all want what's best for this country. So my goal is to lift as many of those voices up. But I will say, when it comes time to make any decision, I will not leave a broken country to my kids or anybody else's. And so I'm going to make sure that we have a leader that can make sure this country doesn't go on as divided as it's been. And I think if we can find that right voice, then hopefully we create a better future for everyone.
Yeah, that was, in my introduction to you, Governor. Do you think it's possible? It seems like we are hopelessly divided. We're all living in our own, information ecosystem and echo chamber. Do you truly believe that it is possible at this juncture? I in my
I
lifetime
know
have
it
never
is.
seen the country, maybe in 1968, but I was only 11 years old. But do you think it's possible? And I know you're going to say yes, but gosh, do you worry? Do you worry that we're at the point of no return in a way?
I have two teenagers. I worry about things all day long. I know that we can bring this country together. And I'll give you kind of two examples from Kentucky. One's the numbers. This is a state that Donald Trump won by 30 points, that I have a 68% approval rating in. It means that people can support different individuals, that can put faith in different individuals in ways that show that we can come together. Or here's the other one. Now, during this last election, people around the country seemed to be at each other's throats, but in Kentucky, the temperature was turned down. We didn't see as many signs. We didn't see all the flags, and we didn't see people arguing with each other. Yes, they voted the way that they voted, but we did not see the conflictual nature that we've seen certainly 4 years before. Listen, I'm optimistic. I'm always optimistic because pessimism's never solved a problem. But I think I've seen it, and I'd love to emulate it for the rest of the country.
I know that you've recently launched a podcast. So has Gavin Newsome. By the way, when you mentioned all those governors, I don't think you mentioned Gavin Newsome, did you?
No, but Gavin is a great voice that's out there too. He and I get along. I disagreed with one of the guests he brought on, which I do disagree with. But
Who
I think
was that? Who was the guest you disagreed with? Charlie Kirk?
Steve Bannon.
Steve
Uh,
Bannon.
Steve Bannon is a voice of hate and even violence, and I just don't think we ever give that oxygen. But the way that Gavin engages, I think can potentially be a positive thing. My podcast, the Andy Beshear podcast, comes at it from a very different perspective. Mine's about how much stress that the news and the actions of this administration are putting on people. I mean, people are waking up already stressed, and it's that much harder to get through your day. So on the Andy Beshear podcast, we try to go through the issues, but in a conversation amongst friends. The goal is to talk about them, but to hopefully leave feeling a little bit refreshed or a little bit lighter, because I worry about the mental health of the country just being hit by the news minute after minute after minute.
I know that you're also doing direct camera talks from your car. And one of the criticisms of the Democrats, I interviewed Chris Hayes about this, who wrote a book, is that Democrats were so uptight and cautious and didn't want to make a mistake and had a basic lack of understanding of the current media environment, which was you just got to do everything everywhere all at once, talk to people, meet them where they are, and be yourself, have authenticity, as you were talking about earlier, just talk like a normal person. Mm-hmm. Is that an effort to do? Is that your effort to do that?
Yeah, people want real, and they want to know the real you. And part of the reason that people in Kentucky know the real me is during COVID, I did an update every day without missing a single day for a year and a half. And when you're going through all of that, when you're getting information while you're doing the update, people see who you are. When you have to read the death list every day for a year and a half, they see that you care. And so I started doing these selfie style videos to be able to talk directly to people again. And I'm going to tell you, I make the worst selfie style videos in terms of filming. I do it myself on my phone. But I
People
think
like that, though. They don't want
I
it to
agree.
be too polished and,
Well, they certainly don't get
to be
polished for
perfect.
me.
Yeah. But what has the response been to that kind of communication?
It's been really positive. It's people at church coming up and saying, "Keep doing it." It comes up during my day. It helps me know what's going on, but it helps in how I process things. I get more requests for them than probably anything else I've done in the past year. So we keep doing them. I haven't gotten any better at filming them, but it's also a minute and a half of what I'm thinking that day. And so sometimes it'll be something the administration has done. Sometimes it'll be something we've done in Kentucky. One of the ones that had the most views is just telling people to take a moment for themselves. Turn off the TV, take a breath, go somewhere with your family, make some great memories. And there were so many people that said I needed to hear that.
I know we met many years ago at Muhammad Ali's funeral in Louisville, Kentucky. And I'm just so happy that we have finally had a chance to talk and that I've enabled a lot of people who have heard about you to hear from you directly and get to know you a bit. Governor Beshear, thanks so much.
Hey, I'm honored you'd have me on. Thank you so much.